students, now we are move towards next experiment, that is our experiment number 9. If you see to design and configure access list configuration on the router, right? So this we also called it as an ACLs, right? So if you go on the course page of NDL, right, so in that if you find out the experiment number 9, so you will get all the details with respect to this particular experiment, right? So if you see, we will discuss about what is the prerequisite for this particular as the experiment is concerned, right? So knowledge of basic concepts of the networking, obviously it will be needed to basic networking commands. In order to, we need to use this particular command line interface in order to do the access control list, right? Then IP addresses classes, what are the different addresses of IP addresses, what are the different classes of their class A, class B and all that things, right? Then exposure of Cisco packet rule, you wanted to know more about it, right? Because we wanted to use all the functionality with respect to this particular tool, right? And next is the routing configuration of router through particular CLI, right? So how to configure router with respect to in command from the command line interface, right? That also you must know, because on command line interface itself we are going to configure our router for that particular ACL part, right? And then the access control list, basic concept, what it is, why we are going to use that thing and all that thing, right? So these are nothing but the sum of the prerequisite for this experiment number 9, right? And if you are talking about the problem statement, right, so so if you see the access list, right, so which will be needed, and there are some advantage of it, right? For example, if you wanted to restrict some person or restrict some of the network to use your private services or whatever you are going to use, or whatever you are going to use, right? So you need to restrict them to view all the things, right? So for that purpose you are going to you can apply the access list over there, right? So only the allowed IP addresses can be visible your progress or your work, right? So accordingly there are two types of the ACLs, right? So standard as well as the extended, right? So there are some identifier, or we can use some numbers to this particular list, right? So and depending upon the numbers also you can identify whether it will be a standard ACL or whether it will be your extended ACL, right? And also you are going to able to filter the inbound and outbound traffic from that particular routers, right? And also you can be able to analyze the effect of this particular ACL and router in order to know what happened before applying the ACL and what will be there after applying the ACLs, right? So we will see these results very neatly over in this particular topology, right? So if you see in this particular topology, I have used some of the one server, right, two routers and one switch is there, and the two end devices, that is two PCs, are over there, right? So in this, if you see, I'm going to provide a different kind of the network to each of the interface of a router, right? For example, if you see this router number 1, that is router 0 R0 if you concern, right? So this is FA0/0. For this particular port I am giving this 10 series IP, right? And for this FA0/1 I am giving here the 192 series IP, right? Again the same, if you see for the router number 2, that FA0/1 I am giving here the 192 series, and for FA0/0 I am giving here the 20 number of 20 series, right? So the series will be different. The network we are I am going to use for each and every port is a different kind of the network, right? And through that I am going to I need to restrict some of the person or some of the PCs which can't be accessed to some of the services from that particular router number 2, right? So I'm going to apply different kind of the ACLs on this particular PC1, right? So in order to restrict this particular PC1 to access this particular router or this particular router 2, whatever the services which are given by the router 2, that will be must restricted to this particular PC1, right? And again, how to remove this particular ACLs from that particular router, right? So that also we will see, right? So we will implement here how to configure ACL, right? And how to remove the configuration of ACL from the router, right? So both part we are going to see in this particular today's experiment, right? So just we will go with the lab manual first, right, and then the implementation and demonstration of this particular configuration of ACL, right? So we will just start with the first of all the lab manual thing, right? So right, so if you see in experiment number 9, right, we are going to design and configure some of the logical topology with respect to our ACL, that is nothing but the access control list, right? And we are going to configure this on our router, right? So now before that, before starting with that particular implementation, right, we will see what exactly the ACL can do, right? So ACL is nothing but one of the security feature, if you see, right, which will be allowing you to filter the network traffic, right? So whatever you have configured, right, so based on that the network traffic can be filtered by this particular ACL, right? And it can be filter all the inbound and all the outbound traffic from that particular interfaces, right? So on which we are going to configure this particular ACL, right? So it also examine every packet which we are moving from one interface to another interface, right, which will be in a specified direction, right? And it will takes the appropriate action whenever it possible for the ACLs, right? So so there are total two types of this particular ACL, right? The first one is a standard access list, and the second one is the extended access control list, right? So the standard ACL can use only the source IP addresses, right, in order to filter the network traffic, right? And it will be uses typically to permit or to deny the entire host or entire network, right? So they cannot be used to filter individual protocol or individual services, right? For example, if they wanted to restrict to FTP or restrict to telnet, right, so it can't be possible with this particular standard access list, right? Because it will be allowing, or it will be used to only either they can be permit, or either they can be deny entire host or the entire network, right? So it can't be useful for the individual part, right? And if you wanted to use that part, then you need to use this particular extended access list, right? So it will be use the source addresses as well as the destination addresses, right? And it also having the functionality that it can be filter or specific protocol or specific services that you need to extensively use the ACLs on that particular host or that particular service, right? Then it can be possible with the help of this particular extended access list, right? So whatever the disadvantage of that particular standard access list, right, so it will be removed in this particular extended access list, right? And also this particular ACL can be configured in either a number or a name, right? So if you decide to use a name to configure the ACL, then it may called as a named ACL also, right? So that also you must know, right? So if you are using a name, then it will be called as a named ACL, right? So now while configuration of the standard ACL, right, so you must know some of the parameters, right, or some of the syntax which will be required to while configuring this particular ACLs, right? So what are they, right? So if you see, so number 1 to 99, right, so these are nothing but the standard access lists you can call, right? And from 100 to 199 you can call it as an extended access list, right? So this standard access list 1 to 99 will be useful for denying or accepting that particular host or that particular network, right? But at 100 to 199 can be useful for specific service if you wanted to deny, or specific host you wanted to deny, right? So that can be possible with this particular extended access list, right? Then this particular used three parameters. For example, if you use a deny, then that gives you the specify the package to be rejected, right? Or if you are using this permit, that will be allowing to forward that particular package, right? and if you are using this particular remark, then it will be giving as a comment to that particular access list entry, right? So in that way you can be use all these three parameters or three keywords under that particular access list, right? And also there is a way to give the host name, right? So whatever the host name you wanted to give, so you can use that particular a.b or c.d, that is nothing but the IP address of that particular host, or you can use directly any. So any can be any source host can be rejected or accepted, right? And you can also use the IP, host address directly or host name directly in that particular router, right? So in order to configure the ACLs into it, right? Then we will see this particular topology as I already discussed with you, right? So here I am using two routers, right, and one server and one switch and the two end species, right? So now what I am going to do here, right? So I wanted to restrict this particular 10.0.0.2 system in order to use this particular router 2, right? So I need to apply ACL on this particular router 2 in order to prevent or in order to secure from this particular 10.0.0.2, right? So whenever the request is come from this particular host, right, so it may not be given access to this particular router 2 services, right, and it must be in deny, right? So there is a command, or we will call you can use this particular access dash list space 10. So 10 is any number from 1 to 99, right? So deny host. So we won't want this particular host can be use all the services which router 2 have, right? So that's why I'm configuring on a router 2 ACL, right? So access list 10, that means it is nothing but your standard ACL, right? Deny host and the host IP address you need to provide here, right? So so it will be denying all the host or all the network, right? But what you want only this particular host needs to be denied, right? So you need to accept all other hosts, right? So for that you need to give again a second list, that is access list 10 again, to permit any, right? So it will allows any other host, right, other than this particular 10.0.0.2 to access that particular, or it will use the permission to access to that particular router 2 resources, right? Again you need to provide the inbound or outbound traffic, right? So which type of the traffic you want it to restrict, right? So that also you can be filter it out, right? And for that, if you see interface FA0/1 part, you are giving the accessing in inbound traffic, right? So IP access group 10, again the same number you need to use everywhere, right? So it is nothing but for the matching to the ACLs, right? And the IN is nothing but for the inbound packets or incoming packets you are going to filter, right? So you need to provide it that, right? And again one command is there to list it out, whatever you have created the access list or you have provided the access list. For showing that access list you need to fire a command show space IP space access dash list, right? So it will be gives you an access list, right? So for example, if you see here, this is nothing but the standard IP access list, right? So because you are using the number 10, so it is in between 0 to 99, right? It will be denying host 10.0.0.2, and for another ACL it will be permitting any other host other than this particular 10.0.0.2, right? So let's we will check with this in the then after that I am going to ping from this particular 10.0.0.2 to that particular second router whether it will be pinged or not, right? So it will be request timeout, it will be coming. That means you are not going to access that particular router 2 resources, right? Because the ACS is applied on that particular router 2 and it will be denying your request, right? So it will be won't allow, right? And if you wanted to remove that ACL from that particular router 2, for suppose, right? So what you need to do is whatever the command you are going to use for ACL, right? So just you need to append no in front of that particular command. That means no access list 10 deny host 10.0.0.2, right? So it will be removing that particular ACL from that particular routing router, right? And then if you are going to ping on the same system for that particular router, then you will get the successfully pinged over there, right? So that means the ACL will be removed from that particular router and you are going and you are getting the communication over that particular thing, right? So this is nothing but explanation for this particular experiment, right? Now we will do some hands-on on with respect to this, right? So I will just move to my Cisco packet tracer. Okay. Okay, now if you see here in this particular topology, right? So I have already mentioned and already explained you this particular topology, what I am going to do in this particular thing, right? So if you see in the configuration of this particular routers, right? So I want to if I want to check the configuration, right? So I just double click on this particular PC1, right? So it will be gives me an IP configuration. If you see, I am giving here the 10.0.0.2 as IP addresses, and default gateway is nothing but my router's IP address. So here it will be 10.0.0.1, right? At the same way, for this particular PC2 also, it will be giving me it will be giving me directly the same thing, that is 10.0.0.2, and the same default gateway as 10.0.0.1 for my second PC also, right? And for if you see for this particular server, also we will check, right? This that particular server part, this particular fast Ethernet, if you see, right? So it's having this particular 20.0.0.2 as my IP addresses, right, for my FH0/0 fast Ethernet 0 port. Okay. And then if you check with the configuration of this particular router 1, right? So for 0/0 it will having 10.0.0.1, and for 0/1 it will having 168.0.1 as my IP addresses, right? And the similar fashion for if you see with the router number 2, right? So it will be having for fast Ethernet 20.0.0.1, and for the fast Ethernet 0/1 it having 168.0.2, right? So this is nothing but the configuration of each and every devices, right? Now what I wanted to do is for router 2 I want to apply the ACL part, right? And I want to restrict this particular PC1 to use the resources of this particular router 2, right? So I wanted to use this particular CLI, right? So for that what you need to do is you need to first of all fire a command en, that is nothing but the enable this particular router, right? Then you need to apply the config space t, that is configuration terminal of that particular router, right? Then I'm going to use this particular access list and giving the number 10 in between 0 to 99, that is nothing about my standard access control list, right? And I am denying this particular host which having the IP address 10.0.0.2, that is nothing but my PC1, right? And other than this particular IP, right? So other whatever the other internet networking components are there, right? So I am permitting all these kind of the components, right? So for that I am using here the access dash list 10 permit any, right? So any, that means other than this 10.0.0.2, right? And then I'm going to accepting, or I'm going to filtering the traffic of inbound, right? And for that I'm going to use this command IP access dash group space 10 space in means for inbound traffic, right? And I'm just existing for my router's configuration, right? So by doing this, right, I'm going to check with the connectivity in between this particular PC1, right? So I'm just double clicking on this PC1, right? And going to the command prompt, right? And just I'm going to ping that particular router 2, that is 20.0.0.1, right? Okay, so I'm not able to get a ping to this particular thing, right? So it will be gives me an destination host is unreachable, right? That means our ACLs is configured successfully, and I'm able to restrict this particular PC1 from allowing the resources or utilizing resources of this particular router 2, right? Now I'm going to removing that particular ACL from this particular router 2, for example, right? Then I will also show you that one, right? So whatever the command you are writing out for the giving access control, right? So for that, what you need to do is just before that you need to provide no to the access list denying, right? And then you need to check. So from here also you can check whether it will be allowing or not, right? So it will be allowing now my PC1 to my router 2, right? So it will be allowing me the resources, right? So also you can check from this particular ping as well. So I am going to check with that command prompt also, right? So now if you see, it will be giving me the access, right? So whatever I am getting ping over there, right? So my ACL I have removed successfully from this particular router 2, right? So this is nothing but the configuration of ACL on router, right? So this is very much important in terms of the security if you're concerned, right? If you wanted to restrict any person from accessing any kind of the resources, then you can apply this particular ACLs, right? So there are two types, standard ACLs and extended ACLs, right? So you can take a benefit of this particular thing, right? So this is all about with respect to your configuration of ACL on router experiment number 9. Okay, thank you for joining.